Hello, and welcome to Charted, an astrology podcast. My name's James, and today we are going to talk about the sign of Aries. So in the last several episodes, we've gone through pretty much all of the basics of a birth chart, with the one lone and pretty big exception of the signs. And I wanted to do those last because I felt, at least in terms of how I look at things, I find it helpful to understand the root components. And the signs themselves are actually a composite of multiple other components. So to understand the signs, it's helpful to understand the other components and specifically how I look at them, right? We're going to look at the house relationship, whole sign house relationship between the signs, because it's going to tell us how they tend to operate and orient themselves. So that said, we're going to spend the next several episodes looking at each of the signs in depth, what they're about, what the components kind of tell us about them, as well as how their relationships with the other signs as we see them through the houses kind of give us a sense of why they operate the way that they do. What is their modus operandi, etc. We want to know who they are, what they're about, how they operate, why they operate that way. Because if we understand the why, right, we can kind of begin to pick apart, hey, if I have a problem in this particular area, this particular sign, I don't understand it, don't understand why my life in that particular area is tricky. If we understand what's the underlying, right, reasoning for things, then we can begin to, oh, hey, wait a minute, I'm doing this because of X, Y, Z. At least that's how my brain thinks these things through. So we're going to start with Aries. Aries is considered the first sign of the zodiac. With good reason. Because why is that? Well, the zodiac, originally it was concocted, and the tropical zodiac, as Western astrology uses it today, is based off of the seasons. And specifically, right, the beginning of the seasonal year, we would probably associate with spring, right? And I would say ancient history, they certainly would have started their year with the beginning of spring. Because why? Well, winter is when things are kind of dead, right? It's cold, plants die, or at least the leaves fall from the trees, you get snow, rain, and so forth. And then the spring comes, and what happens? Life begins again. Things begin to grow, right? Animals begin to have children, right? All the things that were hibernating for the winter come back out. And so there's kind of this new life that happens each year when the spring comes. And so spring then is associated with beginnings, with new life. And I think in a lot of ways, it's super emblematic of Aries, the sign of Aries. So Aries was kind of associated then with being associated with spring. We can therefore say if the spring is the beginning of the tropical year, right, that is the seasonal year, it would make sense then that that would also be the beginning of the zodiac. So let's dive in. What's Aries represent? Well, it's composed of four things. Number one, it's diurnal. If you remember from the last episode, diurnal means it is masculine, right? You can equate those two things, which means what? It means it is singular and it projects outward. We'll come back to that in a moment. Number two, it's a cardinal sign. What are the cardinal signs, right? Cardinal means it's starting something. It's initiating a change. The cardinal signs are all associated with the equinoxes and solstices. Why? Because they are a transition for the sun. The equinoxes mark when the days are either changing from longer than the nights to shorter, or from shorter than the nights to longer. The solstices are changing from when the days are growing in length to when they are shrinking in length. And so when we have those equinoxes and solstices, right, you have the beginning of a cardinal sign, which is showing, hey, we're changing something, changing what was. So the cardinal signs want to initiate change. They want to act. Next thing. The element is fire, right? Aries is a fire sign. Fire signs are vibrant. They're energetic. Fire deals with our spirit. They kind of compels us. So the fire signs are about the spirit, or maybe another way to say it is the energy. It's the motivations that we have, right, that get us to get out and be. I think in a lot of ways the fire element is really a verb. It's always doing, not being. It's not existent. It's existing, right? It wants to do something. It wants to be something because it's highly motivated. It's all this pent-up energy. When you have energy, what do you got to do? You got to discharge it. You got to move. And that's what the fire signs want. They want to move. So the fire signs are highly motivated. So Aries is going to be a very motivated sign for a variety of reasons. Fire is also the most masculine element, right? So we'll come back to that. The last quality is it is ruled by Mars. And Mars is the planet of what? It's the planet of action. And specifically, it's a planet of self-action, or said another way, self-actualization. Mars is the planet that helps us do things, right? I am hungry. What happens? My Mars says, okay, you're hungry. Let's go get food. I don't have any money. Okay, go work. Now I can get food, right? Mars is about action. And what is action? It's about taking something that's in a stasis, and changing it to something else. That's action. I'm standing, now I'm running, right? It's that verb coming up again. So we have diurnal, that is masculine, right? Self-oriented, projecting outwards. We have cardinal, about what? Initiating change, which is a masculine quality. It's projecting something. We have fire, which again, most masculine. And it's about what? Motivations, energy to do things, action. And then finally, Mars, the planet of action, right, in the self. And Mars is also considered the most masculine planet, or at least I would say equal to the sun in masculinity. And so what do we have then when we put all that together? We get a sign that is definitively associated with action and masculinity. In fact, it's extreme in its nature towards those things. Aries, more than any other sign, truly embodies the male dynamic within astrology, the masculine dynamic within astrology, and it embodies the action dynamic. Aries wants to act, and specifically, it wants to self-act. Why? Because the masculine dynamic is singular. It's not about collective. It's about the self. So the male dynamic, the masculine dynamic, is about the self moving out towards other things outside of itself, right? Moving out into the world. So Aries being so extreme in its masculinity means it is going to be entirely outwardly focused and entirely self-focused. This is going to have some very obvious pros and cons here. And because of the extreme nature of Aries, it's going to be a very black and white sign. There's not going to be a lot of nuance, or maybe nuance is not the right word, but there's not going to be a lot of gray areas for Aries. And the way Aries is going to act is not really going to see a lot of gray areas either. It's very straightforward. It's a very simple sign. So Aries is going to be very self-oriented. Let's talk about that first. Self-orientedness is good and bad. Why? On the good side, it means it knows how to take care of its own needs and its own wants, which means it doesn't have to bother other people. It can self-exist, and it doesn't have a problem with that. And that's a really good quality. Not only is it good for, right, being able to do your own thing, but number two, it's a good quality for survival, because it means you're going to put in the energy and effort to make sure that you, the person, the individual, are capable of surviving. So Aries is naturally going to have its own kind of strength as a result. Internal strength. Why? Because it recognizes I'm the thing. I'm what exists. Nobody's going to help me, so I got to do it myself, and therefore I got to be strong. So there's an inherent strength within Aries in that self-orientedness. The downside, it's very obvious, is it's selfish. And in particular, the selfishness with Aries, it stems not so much from I only care about me. There's certainly some of that. It can definitely manifest that way. But it's almost in a lot of ways more of I'm not even aware of other people. Right? That other people have needs and thoughts and desires. Right? It's a lack of awareness, and we'll come back to that. So Aries is very selfish and self-oriented, right? Which means it's going to be strong and confident and assertive, right? It's going to know how to handle itself. Now, the projecting outward quality means that Aries is only concerned with the outside world. It is not concerned in any way, shape, or form with what's going on inside it, or at least not very much. It's the least concerned about what's going on inside it of all the signs. Right? Its entire concern is with what's out in the external world. And the thing is the external world is honestly dangerous, especially if you go back to ancient times, which means Aries needs to, A, again, be strong, and B, have a demeanor that allows it to conquer the external world so that it itself is not conquered. So this is going to be one of the dynamics with Aries, why it is so aggressive, so assertive, because it's trying to rely on itself, do its own thing, because it doesn't have anybody else. It's not even potentially aware that other people are there. So Aries is going to be very aggressive in the way it handles things. And this aggression, this huge amount of stuff within it, the components all saying act, 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 right? Cardinal, fire, motivation, planet of action. That all says, I want to act. I gotta act. It means Aries is going to be assertive in a way that's both helpful and destructive more than any other sign. If there's nothing else you take away from this episode, take away this. Aries is the sign of self-assertion. Full stop. That's what it's about. I want to self-assert my will, my actions, my needs, my desires. So Aries is going to grab things and pull them in when it feels like it needs to, which is going to be a lot. And that means then that some of the values and desires that it has are going to be all oriented around this, I need to grab, I need to do, I need to go conquer. Because if I can do that, I can survive. So some kind of baseline qualities then that we're going to see with this. Number one, Aries is going to be direct, super direct. There's no nuance. There's no playing games. There's no, let me come up with my strategy. None of that. It's just, I want something, I walk to it and grab it. The end. So Aries is going to be very direct, very confrontational as a result. Because again, an assertive, aggressive quality, an outward projecting quality means you're moving forward towards something. Right? So it wants to move forward towards the problem, towards the issue, towards the wherever it's trying to go. It wants to move forward at all times. So that's the first thing. Number two, it's going to be fast. And we'll see this impulsiveness later when we look at the houses. But it's going to be fast and it's going to be impulsive. There's not going to be a need for thought because everything in it is oriented around action. And if everything in you is oriented around action, that means none of what's in you is oriented around thinking about those actions or how that affects other people. So Aries is always going to act first, think later. This is both good and bad, obviously. The early bird gets the worm, but that also means Aries is going to jump into things when it shouldn't. It's going to be a little reckless. Also means it's going to be really brave. So Aries is going to be a very brave sign. So wherever we have Aries in our chart is going to show an area of life where we tend to act very bravely. Right? Why? Because we jump in. We assert. Aries, again, It's going to be very assertive. It's going to know how to get what it wants, which means it's going to have an implied strength there. I would say the last thing, and this will, again, see through the houses, is Aries can be, because it's Mars ruled, right? Mars is associated with what? Things like anger, conflict, also sexuality. Because of that, Aries is going to naturally be prone to some of the more, sexual things, right? Lustful things. I don't want to say desire things per se, because desire kind of comes in with Venus and the Sun also. But Mars can get bogged down with some of its more primal instincts. Aries can get bogged down with some of its more primal instincts, more so than some of the other signs. And again, that's kind of made troublesome because it's impulsive, right? But that impulsiveness allows it to be extremely fast on its feet, which again is a really good quality in certain situations, in a lot of situations. So that's kind of the basics, right, of Aries. Direct, assertive, aggressive, conflict-oriented, right, self-oriented for sure, and knows how to self-actualize. So let's look at Aries then through the houses. And what I mean is look at how the other houses, the other signs as they're in the houses relate to Aries as if it was in the first. So if you're an Aries rising, this kind of, in a lot of ways, is going to describe your kind of Aries rising quality. But the other signs are going to describe it no matter where Aries is in your chart. So let's look at the underlying motivation first. We're not going to do the houses in order, right? Because I think it's better to show the underlying things, and then we'll get to the other stuff. So what's the underlying motivation for Aries? We look at the fourth house, right? The fourth house is what? Our personal life, our private life. It's also our home and our family. So what was the family like, broadly speaking, for Aries, right? Or for that part of an Aries, right? That part of our life, wherever Aries is. It would have been what? It would have been one of protection, right? It's Cancer. Cancer is in the fourth house from Aries. Cancer is very protective. It tends to hide things. Because why? Because it's mothering, right? And so Aries has a fourth house. It has an internal mindset of protection. I got to protect what's private. I got to protect the home. I got to protect the family. So Aries then is naturally very protective of its private life. It's very protective of its private world. It's very protective of its family. And when you are trying to be protective of something that you have close attachment to, what do? You're willing to fight it off. This is part of why Aries is so aggressive, right? Why? It's protecting something. Specifically, it's protecting the inner parts of itself, right? But as an extension of that, it's protecting its family and its kind of own personal world. Now, Cancer also hides things, right? Why? As a way of protecting itself. It doesn't trust easily. And so then for Aries, having Cancer in the fourth house means it's going to hide what's really going on inside, right? You think of, at least in the West, we think of the typical male dynamic, right? Men tend to not be as in tune with their emotions. They're told to shove things down, hide, push it down, just deal with it. Right? And that's kind of the Aries mindset in a lot of ways, right? I don't need to worry about that stuff. I'm going to hide it. On the other hand, it means Aries can naturally kind of self-regulate a little bit, much better than you would expect. Because why? Cancer deals with self-regulation, right? Emotional regulation, emotional attunement. So Aries' natural component is to hide what's going on deep down, hide his personal life, which means it's not going to be very deep. It's going to be somewhat surface level. And again, what is going on? It's not really concerned with the inner world. It's protective of that stuff. It wants to focus on the outer world. Another aspect of Cancer is it's kind of smothering, right? It can be, anyway. Because again, it's a mother, right? The Cancer wants to grow something. It wants to nurture something, and you want to do that in an environment. And sometimes it can be a little overbearing. So Aries then oftentimes stems from a quality growing up where you were smothered or where the parents were overprotective about something. The guardians were overprotective about something. What's the natural response when you've been trapped and everything is super duper overprotective? You want to get out and try everything, right? Once you break free of the parental home, right? Ooh, now I have freedom. I'm going to try everything. Who knows what I can experience? And there's a bit of a carelessness. Why? Because you don't know any better. Because everything was so overprotective, right? And so that's kind of that other response that Aries has. Now, to kind of build off of this sense of protectiveness that Aries has and the aggression that comes out of that, the second house for Aries is Taurus. Taurus is the sign of stability, right? Physical stability. It's a fixed earth sign. It's ruled by Venus, right? So it's peaceful, it's tranquil, but it's mostly about physical comforts, physical pleasures, physical safety. The second house deals with support systems, and it deals with, we'll start with the support system. The thing that supports, or how Aries feels supported, feels supported very physically safe. That ties back into what's the home environment for an Aries oftentimes growing up. It's one of nurturing, protection. So Aries oftentimes has a parental dynamic that is overly protective, overly safe, right? And so that kind of gets built into the psyche of, I want to be safe. I want to be what? Right? Comfortable. So again, that leads Aries to doing what? Having an outward focused perspective. If I want to be safe at home, if I want to be protected at home, what do I got to do? I got to be aggressive and mean and assertive out in the world so that I can get the things I need to build up that safety. And so the second house for Aries then shows what it values. What does it value? It values physical comfort. It values physical stability, right? Because that stuff provides the container to have that safe, protected place at the home, inside the self. So the Aries motivation then is one of acquiring physical resources, specifically resources that make it feel safe and resources that make it feel comfortable. Because that allows it to have that safety on the inside. Have that safety right in the home. So this is going to lead Aries to being quite ambitious. Right? Aries is naturally a go-getter. Right? We've already said it's a planet of action. It's always wanting to act. And if you're always acting in the world, especially in a productive sense, what's going to happen? You're going to acquire things. So Aries is a go-getter, for sure. And it values that sense of strength, that sense of stability, that sense of safety. Now, one thing, the orientation for Aries, because the outward orientation from all this need for safety is aggression, full on, I'm going to go get what I need, right? That means the Aries mindset sees the world as a place of what? Chaos, of danger. There's two parts to this. Number one, Aries ruled by Mars. Where's the other Mars-ruled sign? It's Scorpio. Where's Scorpio for an Aries? Right? Aries, Scorpio is in the 8th house from Aries. So what does that mean? Well, it means there's a permanent link for Aries with the 8th house. The 8th house deals with danger. It deals with things we repress. It also deals with our psychology. So whatever sign is in the 8th is going to be a sign that is pushed down. It's repressed, right? It's hidden. It's also going to be how a sign kind of tends to respond to danger. So what do we have there? We have Scorpio, which two things with this. Number one, Scorpio's natural predisposition is to hide itself, obscure itself. Well, if you're hiding obscuration, It means you're not hiding anything at all. Right? So that's the first thing. Aries doesn't hide. It's very clear cut about what it wants, what it needs. It does not beat around the bush. So that's one thing. Number two, it means that danger is something that's kind of always on the mind in terms of how Aries acts. Everything is dangerous, so therefore I should, right, be ready for it in a very kind of, I'm aggressive, I'm going to assert. Because if I can, even if I don't believe in myself, even if Aries lacks self-confidence, it at least knows, hey, if I move forward, I might be able to win this, right? So Aries then has kind of an in-depth view on danger, on what's taboo. But it tends to kind of repress that more strategic side of itself. Now, Scorpio is very tactical, right? It's very strategic. It's patient, right? If you think of it like a private eye. If you ever watch a private eye, what they do in movies is very unrealistic. A private eye spends the majority of its time sitting in a car watching and doing nothing, or sitting at a computer or in the library doing oodles and oodles and oodles of research, right? It doesn't really spend a whole lot of time, sneaking around and capturing the bad guys and, I don't know, whatever else you'd see in a noir film or something. So Scorpio kind of operates that same way, though. It's very patient. It looks to what the goal is and says, how can I best get there? And studies it and then acts. So it's a very self-controlled sign. And as a result, Aries is naturally going to repress that. Why? Because it's repressing what's in the 8th house from it. So Aries represses self-control. Self-control really only comes out, right, in moments of intimacy, when it's deeply intimate with something. That's the only time self-control really kind of comes into the picture for an Aries. When depth really comes in is when it's being intimate, and that's rare because it wants to repress intimacy. It goes back to the 4th house thing. It wants to be very protective of the inner self. It's not caring for depth. It doesn't care for it. But that sense of danger then is kind of ever present on Aries' mind, which means it has to take that aggressive stance in the outer world. Right? If I'm aggressive, then I'm ready for danger. Right? I'm always fighting. And kind of Aries' mindset, it really is the warrior. It's always looking for a challenge. It's always looking for danger because danger, as we'll see in the 9th house, leads to growth. Right? If I'm always challenging myself, that means I'm always getting better, even when I fail. Right? Because when you fail, what happens? You learn something. And then you can try it again. So Aries has this I'm just going to throw myself all in, kind of a nature, win or lose. If I win, great, I move on, get what I wanted. And if I fail, I turn around and start again, try again. At least, ideally, that's what it's going to do. So the other aspect of this sense of peace, I guess, I didn't mention this, but safety, right? The other thing we'll notice is if Aries is always seeing the world as kind of this dangerous place, then it would make sense that the thing it really values, the resource that it's trying to acquire, is something that makes it feel safe, right? That 2nd house Taurus. But Taurus is ruled by Venus, and the other Venus-ruled sign is going to be what? Libra. So that means, then, that we can look to Libra to get or the 7th house, I should say, in Libra. We should look to that to understand what is Aries not, right? For one, what is Aries not? It's not balanced. Libra is the sign of balance. So Aries is absolutely unbalanced. It's very extreme masculinity. But number 2, right? Libra is peaceful. It has harmony amongst people, right? Why? Because it tries to find the balance. And finding balance means you're finding a way to cooperate, i.e., you're finding peace. So what Aries wants is it wants peace from other individuals. Because if it has peace from other individuals, what happens? It can now feel safe, right? It goes back to that sense of, what do I value? I value safety. I value stability. As another thing in terms of the Taurus second house, valuing stability means it's inherently going to value consistency. And as we see, Aries is extremely consistent. It's a yes or a no. It's a right or a left. It's a black or a white, right? It's consistent. There's no, right, I kind of feel like this sometimes, kind of feel like that other times. No, it knows what it wants, and that's it. There's not really much to discuss. So it's actually a very, very consistent sign, like supremely consistent. It's just very extreme in the nature of it. Hence the unbalanced nature of it, right? It's just full masculinity. So going back to the seventh house then, what does Aries want? Aries wants stability. It wants peace. It wants somebody who can treat it peacefully. But Libra is also, being about balance, means it's about equals. So what does Aries want? It wants an equal in its partnerships or in the things that it desires. Why? Well, twofold. Number one, it wants somebody else to see it as an equal, right? Because in a lot of ways, Aries is kind of a child. Going back to this Cancer fourth house, right? The dynamic, as I mentioned, is kind of like a parental situation. It's overbearing, right? It's smothering. It's overprotective, which can lead you, I'm not saying every Aries has this problem, but it can lead to thoughts of, I'm not really strong enough. I'm not big enough, right? Self-doubt can kind of creep in because you've never had the ability to experience things because your parents kept you hemmed in. And so the natural thing, you move out from that, and it's like, I don't even know what I don't know, right? There's a whole world at my fingertips. I can go anywhere. I can do anything, right? But am I sure of myself, right? And the big challenge or kind of learning process for Aries is learning how to self-assert. But that sense of kind of stepping out, right, from the home. If we think of it like a child, right? What happens when a child first kind of is born, right? They're very attached to the mom. We'll come back to this example too. Attached to the mom, right? And then at some point, what happens? They begin to sit up, right? And from there, they begin to reach around, right? Reaching around sort of starts to happen before sitting. But at some point, they learn how to sit. And when they sit, suddenly their field of view is a little bigger. Hey, there's other things around me. And now I can reach them. And then at some point, they see something far away, and they start to try to figure out how to get to that thing, right? They learn to crawl. Then eventually, they learn to climb and to stand up and then to walk. And then as a parent, you're deeply in trouble. But those moments where the child first kind of learns that stuff where, hey, I have sort of an independence now, right? I can do things. That's kind of what's going on for Aries in a lot of ways. It's this, oh, wow, I can do this myself. Cool. And then it wants to try and do everything because there's all this stuff to do. But that aspect then means that there's this kind of maybe subconscious feeling of, wow, I don't even know what's out there. And I am a child, right? I am kind of this kid. So Aries in a lot of ways is kind of a little kid. We'll see this more in the fifth house as well in a moment. And so what does it want? It wants somebody to not treat it as a child, right? Treat me as an equal. Don't treat me as the child who just figured out how to run around. Treat me as an equal. Because obviously, as an adult, anybody with Aries placements, they're not going to be a child anymore. So don't treat them that way. They don't want to be treated that way, right? Because what was the internal dynamic? One of being mothered, one of being treated like a child. So they want to be seen as an adult, right? So they want somebody to see them as an equal. This will tie in also to the 10th house, that responsibleness. So Aries wants to be treated as an equal. It wants to find a partner that is an equal to it, right? This is the other part of that equal dynamic is when you have two people who are equals, what happens? When they rub shoulders, when there's tension between them, if they're equals, they both grow, right? If they're unequal, one overpowers the other, and that just keeps happening. And so the growth is very limited and may only be limited to one person or completely doesn't happen at all. So Aries, by its nature of needing to grow, is going to want partners that are equal to it. Not only treated as an equal, but also equal to it so that it can, so that it can grow. Right? There's a verse in the Bible. I grew up Christian, but so as iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. Right? That's that Aries-Libra axis. Aries wants that equality. Hey, be equal to me so we can sharpen each other, so we can both improve, so we can both get better. In terms of other motivations, right? I mentioned Aries wants to get out, and it really represents beginning, right? With cardinal and fire and Mars and spring. Where do we see that in the chart? We see that in the 5th house. Right? The 5th house for Aries is what? It's Leo. Leo is the sign of self-expression. The 5th house deals with creation. So Aries self-expresses, through creation, through making things, through being productive. So an Aries that can't produce is going to be a very low self-esteem Aries. So if you have Aries placements, make sure they are producing something, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, whether it's right intellectually, imaginatively, whatever realm it's in. Make sure they're producing, because that's how you kind of get them fueled up. So Aries really wants to self-express through production. 5th house also deals with what? Passions. The things we enjoy. This is going to tie back into that kind of kid-like nature of Aries. Why? Because the 5th house is the house of fun. And if you self-express through fun, what does that mean? It means you're going to be playful. And what are kids? They're playful. What are adults? They're responsible. At least that's the way we kind of perceive ourselves. So Aries kind of has this really childlike nature to it, which is, again, ties back into that. I need to find somebody who sees me as an equal, who doesn't see me as a child. Because that's how I felt growing up. Aries also then is going to self-express through what? Through competition and risk, because those are also associated with the 5th house, which means Aries is very happy to compete. In fact, it loves competition. And that's going to tie into the 9th house here in a moment. Right? Aries loves competition. It's a very competitive sign. And its identity is going to be really wrapped up in what it produces, how it competes, right? So there's certainly going to be a lot of ambition there as a result, but it also can lead to an arrogance, right? All of the fire signs have a different kind of form of pride that they all deal with. For Leo, it's just vanity, right? For Sagittarius, it's kind of a haughtiness, right? I know, so therefore you listen to me. With Aries, it's an arrogance of look how great I am. Look what I can do, right? It's not really, hey, look at me, look how beautiful I am. It's not like that, not like Leo. But it's more of a, look what I'm capable of. Look at my potency, right? Look at my creations. Because for Aries, creating, right, competition is an extension of who it is. And this is also going to tie back into the 4th house. Why? The 4th house deals with the family. What is it protecting? The family. But also 4th house deals with lineage. So by producing something, Aries can then continue and protect that lineage, right? Especially producing children. 5th house also deals with romance. I mentioned Aries can be a very sexual sign because ruled by Mars. Well, surprise. 5th house, the house of romance, fun, sexual excitement. That's where it self-expresses. So Aries is naturally going to be prone to being a tad more horny, higher libido. especially if you Mars or Venus placements there. Not always, all right? It depends on the chart, but certainly is kind of a broad stroke rule. It tends to, right, really enjoy those things. And Leo's a fixed sign, which means there's a constant nature to it, right? Which means then that Aries always pretty much, right, it finds the things it enjoys and it kind of really wants to stick with them. Now, it's not like a Taurus where it just holds on to it for literally eternity, but there's a staying power, right? When competition comes around, Aries is in it to win it, right? They really want to go the distance to the extent that they can. Now, the way they go about that is throwing themselves all in, right? Which is a little different than, say, Scorpio. I don't know why I was blanking on that for a second. But yeah, it really enjoys competition. It's a very competitive sign. But that energy, that fuel, also means it's going to be very ambitious and can channel that competitiveness, that need for creation into useful things throughout its life. Now, the fifth house is trine to the first. This is why it's so important, I think, for the fire, or especially for the fire signs, because they have Leo in one of those trine houses. Right? But this sense of self-expression is very natural for Aries. So natural, in fact, right, because of this trine relationship, that it's something that kind of, it just always is. You know what you get with an Aries. They're very obvious in their nature. Again, they don't hide things. Or they kind of do, but it's all very private stuff, very personal stuff. They tend to avoid the taboo, and they tend to, right, just kind of be surface level, because they don't need to worry about the stuff that's on the inside. They're all focused on what's on the outside. Now, the ninth house. Ninth house deals with what? Our worldview, right? It's the joy of the sun, kind of a house of purpose, if you will, right? Broadening our horizons. And what's there? It's Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the sign where we find meaning. So what does that mean? It means for Aries, it finds meaning through growth, through growing its own self, through broadening its own horizons. This is why it wants a partner that isn't equal to it, right? This is also fueled by its need for being competitive. If I am competitive, that is going to allow me to challenge myself so that I can grow, so that I can get better, so I can create better things that can, again, I can use to protect and enhance my lineage. They're extension of myself. So Aries finds meaning through its belief systems, through its religions, through its philosophical views, through learning, through growing. Aries wants to grow. It's a need to grow kind of a sign. But the thing is, it's a fire sign. So that growth comes through what? Comes through experience. It doesn't grow through reading a book. It doesn't grow through, right, practical application of skills. It grows through experiencing things. And it's very open-minded to new experiences. Aries also is going to have a pretty deep attachment. Maybe attachment's not the right word, but a deep connection between its sense of purpose, or achieving a sense of purpose, and undoing, right? It's because Jupiter rules both the 12th and the 9th. 12th house is the house of loss. It's the house of undoings. It's the house of vices. It's the things that trip us up in life. So what do we see? What's the connection there? Well, it means then that for an Aries, if it cannot find a purpose, right? If it can't grow, right? If it doesn't have some belief system through which to kind of serve, it's going to feel like it's failed. It's going to feel like it's lost. It's going to feel like it has no, I don't want to say sense of self-worth, but again, it's a trine relationship back to Leo and back to Aries. So growing And not just growing, but finding a religion or a philosophy or a political belief or whatever it is, worldview, that gives Aries something to chase after, to move towards, is really important. I think when you first learn about the signs, or at least this was the case for me, you kind of learn Aries is the warrior, it's direct, it's aggressive, kind of the end. But the thing is, Aries is actually a very belief-centric sign, right? A very worldview-centric sign. It needs to have some overriding purpose in terms of what it believes, whether that's religion, whether that's philosophy, whether that's just ambition, right? Career ambition, that's fine. It just needs something there in terms of its goals, or else what? Or else it's going to lose itself because of this connection between the 9th and the 12th. It's going to undo itself. And if it has the wrong purpose, it's going to chase after things that are harmful to it, right? It has to be careful not to self-indulge either. It's another Sagittarius quality. Since we brought up the 12th house, let's talk about that. 12th house for Aries is going to be Pisces. What's Pisces? Pisces is a mutable water sign ruled by Jupiter. It's expansive water. Pisces just takes it takes everything and combines it into one big soup where it all becomes indistinguishable. And so the individual is lost in the whole. The 12th house is what we don't understand, right? It's a subconscious thing. And so what is that for Aries? Well, wholeness, or the connection to the whole, is what's misunderstood, what's not understood for Aries, which is why it's so insanely individual. It's stepping out from that sense of, I was, right, a piece of this greater thing, to now I'm it. It's kind of the reaction as you move through the signs. But Aries doesn't understand that deep connection to everything else. So what does that mean? It funnels into Aries' kind of inability to understand other people's points of view, at least kind of innately. It really has to focus on it, right? It taps back into that lack of, I don't want to say self-awareness, because it's not self-awareness, but lack of social awareness, lack of awareness of other people and their needs, right? Because it's not intuitive. The intuition for Aries is all internally centered, which means it's all instinctual instead of intuitive. It's not to say Aries can't have intuitions, right? It's largely going to depend on the rest of your chart. But Aries on its own is relying more on its instincts than anything else. And it's got good instincts, for sure. So that Piscean intuition, that connection to things beyond the self, really come down and boil down to a subconscious framework where for Aries, it picks up on other things, the collective, in a very subconscious way. So it's going to pick up on things that it doesn't really understand. It's not going to know what to do with. They're going to be there. And that leads it to instinctually kind of doing things. Again, the other aspect is that sense of not really feeling connected. Pisces also is a chameleon. It changes into what's around it, right? Partially as a way to hide itself, but partially because it just doesn't understand. It has no clarity of what's going on. There's so much, you just can't put it together. So it just kind of becomes everything all the time, where bits and pieces of it kind of ebb and flow up to the surface, and you see that bit, and then it kind of flows back down. Another piece kind of ebbs up, and suddenly you see something else, right? So it's changing. So what is Aries not? Or rather, what does Aries not understand? Constant change, the chameleon-like nature of things. So what does it mean? It means Aries is going to be straightforward. You're not going to be confused about what Aries is, because Aries doesn't understand nuance. It doesn't understand subtlety and complexity. It's very simple, because Pisces is anything but simple. It's excessively complex. Pisces also, the nature of it is to escape, to swim around, right? And so what does that mean? It means Aries doesn't understand the idea of escape. So what does that mean? If you can't escape, what do? You move forward, right? If there's an obstacle and you can't get around it because you don't understand the idea of escaping, you charge through. That's your only path. And this leads to, again, why Aries is so direct. Just move through the obstacle, plow through it, even if it's a brick wall, because I don't understand that I can just swim around it. On a subconscious level, right? Or maybe that's not the right term. On the kind of aloneness, right? Because the 12th house deals with solitude, right? In order for Aries to really connect with the greater beyond, it has to be in solitude, right? By finding solitude, that's how it can connect to other things. So spirituality for an Aries really requires a certain level of independence and going out alone. Has to be careful, though, because Pisces is prone to escapism. So a natural undoing for Aries then is going to be what? Be escapism, right? Getting so torn up because, hey, I can't find my purpose, right? I can't meet my purpose. I can't grow. So the natural thing is response to escapism. Chase after the, right, alcohol or what have you. So Aries then can be kind of deeply spiritual, but it's going to do so in a way that's very private and very personal. It's not going to do it in front of other people. It's going to do it in a way that's very unique to itself. Now, in terms of some other motivations, things we haven't covered yet, right? I said that Aries wants to establish a lineage or a legacy, right? On the personal level, family level, right? It's trying to protect its legacy, right? It uses creation, the things it creates, as an extension of itself, which means Aries is constantly trying to create new things. And one of the issues for Aries is that it is always starting something. You see this with certain individuals. I certainly see it with football. I'll give an example. There's a coach named Jim Harbaugh. And he has moved from team to team to team to team. Goes to a team, finds some level of success, right? He was at Stanford for a while, right? Then he went to the NFL, kind of right at their peak. He bailed, went to the NFL, built up a team at the San Francisco 49ers, right? They made it to the Super Bowl. They lost 2 years later, right? They're kind of rebuilding. Bounce. See you later. Goes back to college. He was at Michigan, right? Same thing, kind of built the team up, and then right at the height, what does he do? Now he's with the Chargers, back in the NFL. He's bouncing from thing to thing to thing. I don't know if he has any Aries placements. Knowing his personality, his disposition, I would be very surprised if he's not an Aries rising or doesn't have strong Aries placements, because he screams it in terms of his personality. But that need to constantly start new things, that is a very Aries trait. It's always wanting to start. It has a hard time sticking around with stuff, right? Because it's a cardinal sign, right? It wants to start. It wants to create. It wants to initiate. And with Leo being a fixed sign in the 5th house, it means there's this kind of constant need to create, right? And so that's kind of what's going on there. But that constant need means it can establish a legacy, fuel its creationism, right? Its productivity, its potency into what? We look at the 10th house, establishing a legacy. What was the 10th house about? 10th house about our public image, what we're doing out in the broader world. And so what is Aries trying to do? It's trying to be responsible. Let me show everyone how responsible I am so they don't see me as a child. It goes back to that kind of core issue there. Let me be responsible. Let me, right, be diligent. Capricorn is hardworking. It wants to slowly plod away to build something. Let me put in the time and the effort and the diligence to slowly build the thing. But Capricorn requires discipline. So what is it that Aries has to force itself to do in order to find success? It has to find a way to be disciplined, right? And this is going to be a challenge. 11th house, 10th house, both ruled by Saturn. Which means that for Aries, in order to find success materially out in the bigger context of the world, it's got to figure out its own Saturn. right? Why? Because, again, rules both. So Capricorn, the 10th house side, public image side, career success side, requires constant diligence, constant chipping away at things. And Aries is well suited for that because, again, what does it do? It charges headlong into things, right? And when you do that constantly, over and over, you're constantly creating things. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail. And if you're doing it right, you learn from the failures. That's a big thing that Aries needs to make sure it does. Learn from the failures. And as you do that, what happens? Slowly over time, you build up the experience, the maturity, right? The prudence to know, okay, maybe this time I shouldn't quite jump in all the way, right? I've jumped in before and man, it was shallower than I thought. So this time, I see that stick over there. Okay, I'm going to learn my lesson. I'm not going to jump in this time, right? And that's that repetition that Aries kind of has to go through in its public life. And that'll tie in also to the 6th house a little bit. 6th house deals with work, right? How does Aries want to handle work and conflict? It wants to be prudent, right? It wants to be detail-oriented. It wants to see the things that are going on. So over time, and this is it's a hard challenge for Aries, right? But it's part of the growth story for Aries, is learning through trial and error, through effort, through constantly jumping in to the pool. It can start to learn, okay, now I'm noticing things. Now I'm seeing things. I can use this wisdom that I'm gaining, right? That set of experience that's funneling my worldview, 9th house, back to the 6th. Say, okay, I found obstacles. How do I handle them? Well, I can lean back on my experience to understand, okay, maybe I got to watch out for that this time, and so forth. But either way, 10th house means it's going to need to learn to be responsible in order to succeed. The other aspect of that, the 11th house, what is Aries' ultimate goal, right? Because the 11th house deals with our social groups, but it also deals with our goals, our ambitions, our hopes and dreams. So what are the hopes and dreams for Aries? 2 things. Number 1, finding boundaries, right? Aquarius is in the 11th house. Aquarius is about social structures, social boundaries. It's the limits of society. It's the limits of social interaction. It's limits of intellectual thinking and how we organize all of that stuff. And kind of the laws that go on there too, right? Because the order, it's a fixed sign. So what does that mean? It means for Aries, it's trying to figure out its boundaries. Think back to the example of a child, right? When you have a child, first they learn to walk, right? Crawl, walk, all that stuff, and they're starting to figure out, hey, I can move around the world. But once they kind of become mobile, they get mobile, and they, especially after they start to talk a little bit, they begin to recognize, hey, I'm a free thing. I'm not attached to the parent anymore. Right? I am my own thing. And so what's the child do then for the next several years? It pushes boundaries because it doesn't understand limits until it pushes those boundaries and finds the limit. It's very frustrating as a parent. I have 2 almost 4-year-old twins. It's very, very frustrating because they're always pushing your buttons, right? Because they're always pushing limits. Why? Because they're trying to find the boundary. So they know, hey, that's the limit. That's as far as I can take it. And once I get there, I have to stop. Because if I go past it, something's going to happen. Either I'm going to get hurt or, right, I'm going to get in trouble. And so for Aries then, what is it doing? It's kind of broken through of this overprotective stuff where it was too hemmed in to now, okay, I want to explore. I want to see what's about the world. I'm going to do it in a way that's kind of carefree and reckless. Well, that means part of its growth is learning to find those limits, especially in a societal way, right? Aries is kind of like, as I said, it's not really aware to the extent that, hey, we're kind of a collective. We can't just operate as individuals permanently, or you're just going to have constant warfare. So in order to kind of find that sense of peace, that sense of harmony in society, Aries is trying to find the boundaries. It's one of the big goals is learning to figure out those boundaries, learning to find where it fits within society, right? As an individual, Aries is trying to figure out how do I fit in the scope of family? How do I fit in the scope of my friends? How do I fit in the scope of everything, right? And with that, can I climb the ladder and raise my station a little bit, going back to the 10th house? Aquarius is interesting because as a sign, it's very, very collective, right? It's about the collective. But at the same time, it's very individualistic, right? It wants to detach itself from the collective, to stand out from it. So in a lot of ways, Aries is trying to fit in, but also stand out. It doesn't want to just be, again, going back to the 12th house Pisces, it doesn't just want to be enmeshed in the whole where it's indistinguishable. No, it wants to step out from that and distinguish itself. So part of that distinguishing then is that ambition to climb the ladder, to show people, look what I am capable of, right? I can show you how different I am, right? My uniqueness, but its uniqueness comes through its productivity, its creation, its passions. So Aries is trying to stand out from the crowd as kind of a goal, as well as from its friends. You find in Aries, they tend to be uniquely themselves. It's a very good gift, honestly. It's a great gift. Aries, more than most signs, really can embody just, I am me, right? And that can be because of the lack of awareness, but it can also be because they're comfortable with themselves. They find that comfort, right? They embrace that sense of self. The last thing, in terms of social interaction, then Aries can be quite detached. And this, again, feeds back into what is the internal mindset? Hide. I don't want to show people who I actually am because I don't care about that stuff, right? I'm protecting it. It's personal. I'm more oriented about what I can do out in the world, and the world is a dangerous place. So if I'm going to connect with people, I'm going to connect to them in a way, my friends, my social groups, that's a little more detached, right? Impersonal. Because I don't need that close relationship, right? I want that distance. So Aries as a friend can often feel a little more distant from you. Not always, but they can be. They certainly will act that way with their peers and followers. Last thing, we haven't touched on this really, is third houses in Gemini, right? Third houses are day-to-day, right? It's what we do about our day-to-day. And what do you have for Aries? It's a sign of curiosity. It's a sign of exchange, right? A sign of communication also. So what does Aries want to do in his day-to-day life? Kind of bounce around and be curious and always kind of pick the best thing that comes along, right? Because Gemini is always trying to opt for what's the best thing for the moment. And so what you get then for Aries is a predisposition towards kind of being very hard to track on a day-to-day basis. They're all over the place. They're constantly doing new things because they're curious about what's going on around them, right? And if you're curious about what's going on around you, it might lead you to meeting new people and therefore experiencing new things. Again, Aries is very oriented towards, if I experience new things, I'm going to grow, and growth is important. Find meaning through growth. Last thing is Gemini is also very talkative, right? I'm a Gemini moon, Gemini Jupiter, so I can resonate. But Gemini is a very communicative sign, and third house deals with our communication style. So what's the communication style for Aries? Again, it is perpetuating this need for surface level stuff. Gemini is about the gift of gab, right? It's about small talk. It's not really trying to talk about deep, meaningful stuff. It can, certainly. But by and large, Gemini just wants to, hey, let's chit-chat. And so Aries, its communication style tends to be that surface level, kind of honestly all over the place kind of style, where it can actually be quite, can be charming a little bit. It's certainly not the most charming sign in terms of communication style, but it's got a knack for it, right? But again, that fuels that need for, I don't really want to get super deep, right? Because I'm trying to hide it, trying to push it down, because it's something that's personal. And I don't need to worry about the stuff on the inside. I just need to worry about the stuff on the outside. I'm trying to think if I think we've covered pretty much all the houses. So that's more or less everything, right? Now, if you have planets in Aries, what does that mean? Well, it means that you're going to take all of the qualities that we've talked about, and you're just going to apply it to the planet. Right? Let's take Venus for example. Venus is in detriment in Aries, right? Because it rules Libra. It's the opposite then, it's being in Aries. Venus is the planet of what? Value and relationships and love and harmony. And Aries, as we've just discussed, is about what? Self-asserting, right? Pushing down the internal to focus entirely on the external in order to get what it needs, to get what it wants, to find that safety it's looking for. So in a relational sense, then, a Venus in Aries is going to be assertive in its relationships. And it's not going to be particularly deep. It's not to say it can't be, but it's certainly not going to act that way off the cuff. It's going to want to assert and it's want to act. It's probably also going to be, right, embody some more competitive side of things. And it's going to look for partners that are equal to it. So that would be one example, right, of looking at the planets. I don't want to look at every planet, but that's just one example. So where Aries is in your chart then, you can apply these dynamics to whatever house it's in, right? If you have Aries in the 10th house, it means you're Cancer rising. What does that mean? It means Cancers, when they go out in the world, where are they assertive in life? They tend to be assertive and individual, right? Self-assert in the area of their careers and be seen kind of publicly as somebody who's very independent, kind of doing their own thing, getting their own stuff. Oddly enough, you see a lot of entrepreneurs with Cancer rising. If you have Aries in the 5th house, right, you're Sagittarius rising. What does that mean? It means you self-assert towards what? Fun, passions, creations, pleasures. Right? Why is Sagittarius so overindulgent? Because it's got that self-assertion towards its own passions and pleasures. Also the repression of self-control, right? Or in that case, it's hidden. So that would kind of be the way you'd look at it. You'd look at what the house represents, and then you would apply those dynamics to the house. So to sum up, Aries, at its core, it's about self-asserting. It wants to be direct, it wants to be quick, it wants to be impulsive, and it's driven from a need to protect the internal and focus entirely on the external and move out into the world and do things and realistically create. Change, initiate, and go big or go home when it does so. I hope this helps you understand the sign of Aries. Thank you for listening. I know this is probably a long episode, but in the next episode, we'll take a look at Taurus, and we'll go from there. So thanks again for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thanks. Bye.